event space, and right behind this door we have a co-working space where there are lots of cool projects in the making. So yes, please, if you take pictures, write anything on Twitter, tag us, The Place Berlin. And yes, I don't want to be too boring. I will give it up to Sasha here. Thank you very much, and welcome here again.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the next leg of the Waves Summer Roadshow. This is the fourth stop on our trip. We started it in New York, then we did a couple events in London and Amsterdam. Now we're here, and our last event is going to be in August, sometime next month, in Moscow, in our home city. How is everyone doing today? You ready to take a deep dive into smart contracts and blockchain? Oh yeah. Luckily, you're in the right place, because today we have two speakers. First, we're going to hear from Sasha Ivanov, the CEO and the founder of the Waves platform. He's going to talk about challenges and advantages of smart contracts technology in the business setting. And then we're going to have Ilya Smagin on stage, who is the lead developer of smart contracts at Waves. And he's going to give us a closer look at features, approaches, perspectives of smart contracts technology from a development perspective. But before we jump into this, I'd like to give special thanks to binarydistrict.com, who help us to make all this happen. And if you don't know the project, feel free to check out their website, because they do quite cool stuff with not only with blockchain, but also with other disruptive technologies. I'd like to take a few minutes now to talk about Waves Ambassadors program, something that we launched on the 10th of May, a little bit over 2 months ago. And the goal of the program can be boiled down to one word: education. By that I mean growing stronger and larger community, and actually going out there in the world and educating people about blockchain in general and about the Waves platform in particular. In fact, today with us we have two of our ambassadors, Jonathan from Malta, give us a shout, and Alexei, also here. Where are you based, by the way? Okay, cool. Great to have you with us. So the program consists of 5 tracks. We got consuls who attend conferences and various events as speakers and visitors. Then we have local ambassadors who organize community meetups. We have social media people who promote the Waves platform on the web by working with YouTubers, bloggers, media outlets, and so on and so forth. Our developers participate in a big bug bounty program, and also we're going to do hackathons in the future. In fact, we just launched an online hackathon recently. And then we also have a product team which help us out with translations of contents for those countries where English is not widely spoken language. So these are the results so far. We got over 100 people in the program, 35 of which are consuls. In June, it was really, there was a lot of activity. Over 23 conferences attended, and we organized 14 meetups. July is a bit quieter because people go on vacation and stuff. But we're getting there. So compared to the month of May, this is just some stats. We got 10 more people in the program, organized way more meetups, and gathered a lot of leads and people who are interested in Waves. As for plans in the future, I'd like to highlight the first 2 points. We're planning to launch a 4-stage educational program for ambassadors, developers, and also for people who are just in the community. And we also are working currently on forming 3 dedicated regional teams in South Korea, Brazil, and Japan, because we consider those regions strategically important from the community development perspective. So this is a closer look at the console team. You can see the breakdown where our consoles are doing stuff. A lot of European countries, Nigeria, even Cambodia, Japan, Russia, of course. And this is just a list of conferences. Doesn't matter. I mean, come on. It's such a long list. Who's going to read all this text, right? And for July, we got pretty much the same countries for consoles, plus Poland and South Korea. As for local ambassadors, we organized meetups in those countries. There was one, a really successful one in Venezuela, surprisingly, just last week. Over 100 people attended the meetup. It was like packed full house. Even we were like, whoa. So yeah, blockchain is making moves in Venezuela. So these are just a few pictures from those meetups. This one is Barcelona, St. Petersburg, Baku, Odessa. Click. Seems not working. Yeah, it works like that. Istanbul, Turkey, yeah, that one is in Venezuela. And finally, we got a social media team of 34 people, out of which 11 are distinguished members. And they basically work with bloggers, YouTubers, and media outlets in their respective countries. So this is a breakdown of the leads that we've gathered. I find it funny, actually, that we got more ICO projects than investors, but yeah, that's how it goes. So yeah, that's just, what I had to say. If you're interested, feel free to approach me in the networking session today after the event, and or on social media, by email, however, because we are not yet very well represented in Germany, and we don't have that many ambassadors here, especially in Berlin, which is shaping up to be one of the blockchain hubs in continental Europe together with Amsterdam. So yeah, and now without further ado, I'd like to invite Sasha Ivanov on stage. Sasha, please join us and give Sasha a round of applause.
Thank you.
Great to have you here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sashka. We have too many Alexanders in our team, so we are trying to be creative. So I'm Sasha, he's Sashka, but it's the same basically. So it's great to be here in Berlin. Somehow we don't have too many followers here, but I think it's going to change because we are basically not so far from Germany, and it's a great space and lots of activity in blockchain space here. And it's Friday evening, so it's pretty hard to speak about technical things. I'll try to be not so technical and just give us our vision of where blockchain ecosystem in general and smart contracts are moving. Actually, I should say from the start that probably we'll see some developments in this space for a decade, which won't, give too much results. But after that, we'll be in a totally different world. So there are many obstacles to that brave new world, but they are being slowly, removed. So let's start. Actually, we should say something about. Yeah, it doesn't work. Okay, yeah. It's okay. It's not a problem. Yeah. So what is smart contracts basically? This idea came before blockchain. It's quite important because this idea emerged when it couldn't be actually realized. It emerged at the end of last century, and Nick Szabo, which is quite active now as well, suggested that it would be cool to have laws which we have in real life, somehow turned into code. So you don't have to rely on a centralized party to enforce the laws. That would be awesome, actually, because then we wouldn't have any corruption, for example. If you can just trust some computer to run, like, civil code or criminal code, that potentially is very cool. But there was no chance of actually implementing the thing 20 years ago, because we needed a blockchain, we needed a system which is decentralized and can actually enforce code execution in some decentralized way. But it's very cool, it's very interesting that Sabo suggested this idea before blockchain. And I was actually looking recently into different generations of internet. I'll talk about that a little later at the end of the talk. And probably, as you know, we live in Web 2.0 world, and Web 3.0 is just coming. It's not there yet. And it was suggested actually also around the end of the last century by Tim Berners-Lee, who actually invented the internet. And he also said that there would be Web 3.0, which needs some trustless agent to actually implement this Web 3.0. So he also somehow was waiting for the blockchain arrival. He somehow forecast the blockchain emergence as well. So it's quite interesting. So we have not only Satoshi Nakamoto, but a couple other guys who were expecting blockchain to come, actually. So, and smart contracts are just a code which somehow connects to reality and which is enforced on the level of your decentralized application. And what is the first smart contract system realized in the wild, so to say? Actually, it is Bitcoin. It's nothing else but Bitcoin, because if you know a little about Bitcoin and you understand what smart contracts are, you understand that any Bitcoin transaction is basically a smart contract. So how does it work? There is a certain program which is called a script. So Bitcoin scripting is the first example of smart contract language, which runs when you try to spend a transaction. And it checks that you are actually allowed to do so, that your private key corresponds to the private key which is put in the script, which is actually capable of spending this transaction. So it's a small program. Every Bitcoin transaction runs a small program. So, and this program is enforced and executed in a decentralized way. So what we have in Bitcoin, we have the first smart contract system in the world. Nothing else. So the idea of Nick Szabo is actually implemented in Bitcoin. And I should say that we haven't moved too far away from this initial idea of Bitcoin scripts. Yeah, this thing doesn't work. So first we had Bitcoin. It had its own smart contract language, Bitcoin scripts. But there was a problem with them. There were no loops there. So if we had loops there, it would be impossible to make sure that those scripts run in infinite time. So it would be possible to just hand the whole system if you just put a script that runs indefinitely. So initially Satoshi put loops and put loops in the language, but they were later removed because they would be just detrimental for the development of Bitcoin as a working system. So the system worked, Bitcoin script works. You can do many things with Bitcoin scripts actually now. Not only simple transactions, but you can do so many different things. If you are a Bitcoin developer, probably know that you can do multi-signature transactions, you can do pretty complicated stuff, but people usually don't do any stuff with Bitcoin scripts actually. So the next idea, which is quite simple and natural, is to make people who use smart contracts on the blockchain pay for their execution. Through this you can actually restrict execution of infinite loops. So if you want to run an infinite loop, please pay for it. So you won't have money, you won't have so much money to pay for the execution of this infinite program that never terminates. And this is a very basic idea you should realize. So Ethereum, which is Ethereum, I actually describe Ethereum now, is a pretty basic idea. This is the next thing which comes to mind when you are starting to think about smart contracts and how you can run them on a decentralized system. Make people pay for the execution. It's a very simple idea. So Ethereum is robust because it is based on a very simple idea, but quite often simple ideas have their downside. In this case, we have like 3 major downsides. You never know how much gas, how much you have to pay for the execution of the smart contract you want to run, because the time that it will take to execute the contract, it depends on the state of the whole system. It doesn't depend only on the code. It depends on the balances of all the participants. So you never know what's going to happen. So you never know if your contract is actually going to terminate. It is going to terminate. You never know how much money you have to spend to make it actually terminate with the result you want, so to say. This is a big problem because it makes the system unpredictable. And actually, it's not so good because the code is executed by all the nodes of the system. This is another big problem, and everybody has to run the same code. Another issue which emerges here is the following. When you write smart contracts in a high-level language, for example, Solidity, it is later compiled into so-called bytecode, which is run by Ethereum virtual machine. And behavior of this bytecode can be quite different from what you expected, which happened, for example, in the case of DAO. Probably heard about it. This is like probably one of the 3 biggest disasters in the history of crypto, probably, and it's like $60 million were lost due to a bug in Solidity code. But it wasn't actually a bug, it was a problem in the Solidity language itself, because the behavior which was put into the code on high level was quite different from the behavior on the low level. So this is a problem which can be solved through some careful examination, through some code audit. So the severity of this problem is not so bad, but it's still a problem. And another big problem with Ethereum is the following. When you put a smart contract on the blockchain, you can't change it later. So if there is a bug in it, it stays there. So it's like bugs become immutable. So if they are on the blockchain, they will stay there. So you can't just remove the DAO code from the blockchain. Actually, they managed to do that, but they have done a hard fork, and after that, Ethereum Classic came to light, because not everybody liked it, this idea. So you have these problems with current smart contracts. And you need to realize that all those issues, they stem from one thing, that all the network has to execute all the smart contracts. You can't just say, I don't want to run the smart contract because it's not mine. No, you will have to do that, because you cannot take a part of the system and say that only this part of the system has to execute my code. No, it doesn't work like that. If you run the smart contract, it is run all over the network. And it's a big problem, because you actually obtain a system which is not more productive, which is not really more productive than just a simple calculator. But at the same time, it needs like the efforts of hundreds of miners and tons of resources to actually work. So it's kind of strange. And in the same vein, we have the following 2 projects which actually develop the same idea. They're called Hawk and Enigma. Actually, Hawk is trying to somehow combine the ideas of transaction anonymity, Zcash, with smart contracts. So basically, it's like Zcash for smart contracts. It's like anonymous smart contracts. And Enigma is trying to do multi-party computation for the smart contracts. What it means, they divide the smart contracts into different parts, and different nodes run the different parts of the smart contract. So it's a movement into the direction of a system which works in a more reasonable way when not all the network nodes have to run the same code. But it's still in its infancy, and those systems exist just like white papers. And when they're going to be there, nobody knows, because we have many things to solve here. So we have those issues, and we need to make a system which works better than Ethereum. So what we do in Waves now, and Ilya is going to tell more about technical aspects of this thing, and I'll just give a short introduction to the general idea. So maybe we don't need to run those Turing-complete contracts. Turing-complete means here that you can run any type of code on the blockchain. Maybe we could just limit our code to non-Turing-complete applications. What it means? It means that we do not need to introduce any type of gas, any type of additional payments for running the contracts, because they will terminate in infinite time, and it's like somehow ingrained into the structure of the contract, because there is no way it can terminate, because it is made in such a way that there are no loops, and you don't need to actually somehow restrict the time of execution, because there is a guarantee that they will finish their work in a finite time. This system is being tested on Waves testnet now, and is going to be launched in August. And it's like a generalization of Bitcoin scripts. So basically, we take the same idea from Bitcoin, and we get the best out of it. So we create a non-Turing complete system which cannot run any code, but the code that can be run on the blockchain covers like 90% of applications that you have on Ethereum. Actually, there is a project which also shows that this approach can be generalized and become Turing complete. For example, if you consider that the fact that the code can be executed not in one block, but in several blocks of the blockchain system, it can become Turing complete. This project is called Ergo. It's a very nice project, actually, and the idea of non-Turing complete smart contracts was initially proposed by Alexander Chipornoy, and we realized it on Waves, and they realized it on Ergo. Let's move on. Another thing which I should mention is smart contracts in permission chains. And they're quite important because permission blockchains can become some kind of a transitory solution, because open blockchains have their issues now. The biggest issue here is everything has to be executed by all the nodes of the system. And the problem that we have with smart contracts, they actually stem from this fact that all the code has to be run by everybody. So probably it might happen that we won't solve all the issues with smart contracts before we solve the issue with the blockchain architecture itself. For example, in Ethereum, probably they create Casper approach. They want to create sharding. They want to separate the system into like subsystems which are independent, and it might help, of course. But meanwhile, we have this issue with the fact that we run the same code on all the nodes, And it might make sense to consider a system which somehow is not a real blockchain system, because you cannot enter it without permission. So it's called a permissioned blockchain. Hyperledger, for example, Ripple is actually a permissioned blockchain. We are creating a permissioned blockchain, which is called Vostok now, for enterprise usage. And it makes sense to run those contracts on the permissioned blockchain, but it's closer to so-called distributed computation, because it is some kind of a transitory solution. For example, the most simple approach here is to run the same code on all the nodes of this permission chain. And if the result is the same after the execution, you actually accept the result and move on with your blockchain. This is the way it works in Hyperledger, and probably there is no other way you can run it on those systems. And this approach is going to work for, like, I don't know, for a decade maybe, before we really can solve the issue with current blockchain architecture. So, how we can describe the current state of smart contracts? If you are an Ethereum developer or are looking into other systems, EOS or Waves or many other systems that are trying to work with blockchain and smart contracts, you realize that smart contracts now are quite simple. You cannot do complicated stuff with smart contracts now. So very simple applications, probably the most complicated smart contracts is like CryptoKitties game, in which you can create a kitty on the blockchain and combine it with other kitties and then sell it to other people. Probably this is like the most complicated thing you can do with smart contracts now. And when it was realized, it actually hung the whole Ethereum network. What is the issue here? As I said a couple of times, the problem here is the whole network executes the same code. So you have thousands of nodes, so many miners in China, Russia, Europe that spend tons of electricity, and all you get is running a very simple script in a decentralized way. So it's a pity actually, because you waste so much energy and you don't really get too much effect from this. So what can we do? What can we do? In which direction can we actually move the development, and in which direction it should be going to actually make smart contracts working? In an ideal world, like, I don't know, in 20 years maybe. So how is it going to work? Probably we won't have smart contracts that have to be run by more than like 2 or 3 or even 1 node, because there are approaches which are called proof of execution, where you can prove that you executed the code which you were asked to execute. So you just can show a proof that you did all the calculations correctly, and it works already now. But the creation of this proof is quite complicated, quite cumbersome, and it takes actually more resources than running the code itself. But in future, we will have this, because we understand how to do it, not Waves, but like cryptography community understands probably how to do it, and maybe in 10 or 20 years we'll have it. And probably it doesn't make sense to run the smart contract on only one computer, so we'll have a way to somehow divide the code execution between many nodes, which is called secure multi-party computation. And combined with proof of execution, it will probably deliver the system which can actually be used for running any type of smart contract application in a decentralized way. Also, probably off-chain approach is quite important, where you don't put all your contracts on the blockchain. They're executed off-chain, and blockchain just checks that they were executed correctly. In that direction we are going, so maybe in a decade we'll have this proof of execution combined with secure multi-party computation will allow us to run any type of code on the blockchain. For now, we don't have it. We are just approaching a system which can be used in the real world, and the reasons for this are not only technical that I described now, but also there are like business reasons that actually prevent us from using smart contracts in the real world now. It's a great idea, smart contracts, and people have been mentioning it since for 5 years at least. And at the same time, we don't see too many smart contracts in the wild, so to say. Yeah. Why is it happening? It's not only technical thing. For example, what is the first smart contract that Sabo suggested in his article at the end of last century? It was a car loan system where you apply for a loan at a bank, you receive it, and if you stop paying it, you lose access to your car. So somehow on a smart contract level, you cannot start your engine. It's a great thing, actually. Yeah, probably we'll have it in some time. But when you start thinking about how you can implement this in the real world, you understand that you have to combine so many different actors here. You have to combine car manufacturer, you have to combine a bank, you have to combine a payment system, you have to combine some government agency which is responsible for licensing of vehicles, and you have to combine so many different actors into one system somehow. Okay. And it's not only about technical aspect of the thing. Yeah, thank you. There are many things that have to be somehow executed before we have this. We have to combine different technologies. We have to combine distributed ledger technology with probably artificial intelligence and Internet of Things, and we have to add regulation on top of that, because all those smart contracts, they work in a totally different legal space. It's very hard to combine them and somehow adjust them to the current legal system, because this concept of decentralization and a smart contract does not exist in the current legal system. So only after we have our world somehow more digitally transformed, because what we are going through now, we are going through a digital transformation. We are moving from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0. And Web 3.0 is going to be some kind of a prototype for future digital society, when most of our activities are digitalized, and we somehow replace social consensus with technical consensus. So you don't have to have a central authority to enforce the laws, because you have them enforced on a technical level. So there is like a replacement of social consensus with technical one. And only after that we'll have smart contracts which are really applicable for our real life, and they will become ubiquitous, of course. But it will take some effort, and it will take some development from different parties, from blockchain guys, from artificial intelligence guys, because I think artificial intelligence should add to this global ecosystem which will create the digital society world. Internet of Things is quite important. Even this car loan example, you need to have some Internet of Things application that blocks the doors of your car if you don't pay your loan. And we have to put regulation which actually creates some new laws, because without laws we won't be able to live in this world, because it has to be regulated in some way. And since we didn't have any ideas about decentralization like 10 years ago, and now we have systems that are maybe immature, but they are decentralized and they work in some way. We need to have new laws, and only a combination of those things can create some kind of a holistic picture which will actually work for us. We are working on the technical aspect of it, so we are launching the first non-Turing complete smart contracts after Bitcoin, of course. And Ilya is going to tell more about it. And efforts from many other people are needed to make smart contracts actually work. But it's going to happen maybe 5, maybe 10 years, and the world is going to change very considerably. But it will take time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sasha. It's been very insightful. I think we can almost call ourselves certified smart contract experts now after your presentation. You literally, I had a few questions and you killed them one by one. But I still do have one question. When it comes to replacing social consensus with technical consensus, don't you think that governments and people who are in power will try to oppose that process because it diminishes their role in the way how things are run?
Of course, we're going to face some obstacles along this road, but I think on a very high level of society structure, like people who are responsible for making decisions, they really need the system. They don't want to have like middle-level systems corruptible and not reliable. They want to have some kind of a stable system beneath them, so to say. Yeah. So it will start from some like mid-level systems, and hopefully it will move upward, and the whole society is going to become decentralized and like trustless. These systems are going to appear because basically in any society, people realize that the less corruption we have, the better. So there is no way those systems won't come to light. They will be there, and they are just starting to emerge, and technical progress can't be stopped. You can stop it. You can stop it like locally, but globally it will move forward.
Thank you very much. I will have you back on stage for the Q&A, and I'd like to invite Ilya on stage to tell us a bit more about smart contracts from technical perspective.
Thank you, Sasha.
Great to have you here.
Hello, guys. I can just. All right. So, hello everyone. My name is Ilya Smagin. I am Smart Contract Developer Lead at Waves Platform. And before we move on with smart contracts thing, how many of you are familiar with Waves ecosystem? Cool, great. That's a lot. I really expected a lot less, but just to remind a few bullet points. So Waves is the token ecosystem that allows you to issue, send, and trade your own tokens. We have several gateways, both crypto and fiat, so you can cash in, cash out. And we have really great DEX. It's a secure, decentralized exchange that doesn't lock your funds, so trading is completely secure. And by the end of the last year, we've delivered Waves NG. It's a technology that boosted our throughput for our platform up to 100 and I think maybe 300 transactions per second. And now we're about to introduce easy-to-use smart contracts. So what is our approach to contracts? If you first, let's remind ourselves what are the smart contracts. As Sasha just said, these are the small programs that are run by every node, but there are few differences with the regular programs that they write and they use. For example, execution of these contracts should result to the same state on each machine. and unfortunately they can only process data that's stored on a blockchain, so they can't go to Twitter or do some off-chain requests, because that will lead to forks, because all transactions all executions on each node should result in the same state. And of course, they must be guaranteed to complete, as Sasha explained to you, because otherwise the network would either stall or fork, which is not the way we want our decentralized system to work. And the classic model for Waves is account model. It's like a ledger where you have mappings, how many tokens each account has. And in order to spend some funds from your account, you need to provide a valid signature that proves that you and you only own this wallet. Of course, after that, invariants are checked, and only then mappings are updated, and this is the point in time where we can say that the transaction is made. So, what we change with our smart contracts is that now we can allow you to customize this predicate. So, we're moving from strict requirements of signature to allow you to specify the concrete script that you want. It could be many signatures, it could be some data on a blockchain, it could be time or blockchain height, if you will. And so, yeah, we could say that it's like changing locks on a safe. The default lock is just requires you to provide valid signature, and the custom lock will work any way you want, but with the restrictions that all data should come from blockchain. So you can set up a multi-signature, you can make some time locks, or any other predicates that work with the data on a blockchain. So, yeah. It's done through new regular transaction. It's called setScript transaction that you issue like your regular transfer or issue or reissue or many others. So it's a new regular transactions, and after after the script is set, it validates all further transactions that are issued from the account, including all subsequent setScript transactions. Yeah, you had a question. You can obtain any data from a blockchain. Well, it's restricted in the API, but it's just like version 1 of the API. So for now, you can get data from oracles, from data transactions, and from like other sources which are in a blockchain. And you have access to like last block or last transaction, just some small things. We are not focused to provide all possible APIs to query the data immediately. Let's see what data is actually needed. All right. So see it as like a balance of power and simplicity, because this system is non-Turing complete. So it doesn't need any gas, because all computation costs can be known upfront. And it leverages the throughput of Waves NG, because the contracts are really, really small. And still it covers key use cases that how people use smart contracts on a blockchain. It adds multi-signature, it allows for atomic swaps. You have a lot of Oracle use cases that you can think of, like betting, gaming, and it opens up a road for Lightning Network. I think it would be great when we could use NG and Lightning Network multiplied to each other. We'll see completely different speeds than we see now. All right, now I'll say a few words of wallet and tooling and an upcoming support for these texts. So wallet will get a way to set a script or to set a multi-signature script, so that, well, like in a wizard way. Like you don't need to code anything to use smart contracts. You can just use your wallet and input your public keys, and press confirm, well, then your account will be multi-signed. We're also working on advanced IDE for developers so that you'll be able to code it with compilation errors, with text hints, with test runs, and other stuff. The language that we use for smart contracts is actually the one that we created from scratch. It's called RIDE. It's inspired by functional languages like Scala and F#. So it's strong, statically typed. We are and expression based, and the idea is that it will help you to avoid programming errors, because when coding smart contracts, they could be enormously costly to make just one single typo. So we have a lot of tools to support this. I'll just briefly show you some of them. I won't do the whole coding demo, but here is our integrated development environment where you could code some contract. There are some samples here. Oh, okay. Maybe I need to, no, replicate. Wait. No, псиска, yeah. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. So this is the IDE we've been working on. It supports some highlights. So when you code, it will help you to do a lot of interesting stuff. And we also have REPL, like it's called read, eval, print, loop. Very cool thing for developers if you want to test your code interactively. So please try these things out. They're all available, and since we have hackathons, this is the place where people use them. Yeah, so let me get back to where I left off. All right, so now let's discuss future developments. And so Waves has always been a platform for tokens, right? And now we introduce smart accounts that are basically predicates on some wallets. Well, the natural extension would be to merge these things so that tokens can become scripted as well. For example, like account scripts either allows or denies outgoing transactions. Token script might allow or deny transaction with existing token. And it really enhances token use cases. For example, you could do token freeze, for example, right after the ICO. It's a great idea to lock funds for like 3 months, half a year, and you would do this in one line. You can also do something like controlled inflation, so that reissue is limited in par with time or blockchain height. Or you can restrict movements, for example, that each transaction of your specific token should be approved by some entity, probably you. It's good for notary controlled transfers. And we don't stop here. We have several ideas in mind how we can give more power to tokens. We consider adding non-fungible tokens, token leasing, and finally share-based voting, a thing that is demanded a lot in the blockchain space. After that, we'll move to building stateful decentralized applications that are Turing complete and Ethereum-like. And really, there are a lot of things to consider here. For example, should contract be alterable or should it be inalterable? On one hand, it's great that contracts in Ethereum are immutable, but then there is a bug and people lose millions of dollars. So maybe you should be able to change them, or you should be able to define this behavior. Another like ideological aspect is whether coding should be easy or it should be law. The guy who invented smart contracts said that code should be law, but today everyone is trying to build smart contract systems that are as simple to use as possible, like using languages like JavaScript. This is great for hackathons, this is great for demos, but unfortunately, this is also good for bugs. Another consideration is whether we should whether every node should validate all the smart contracts execution. Maybe it should be full, maybe it should be partial. Another idea is since CryptoKitties, we know that if a network will execute, each node of network will always execute all smart contracts interactions, network will stall. Maybe we can address that by distinguishing transactions of tokens and transactions of calling smart contracts and give the priorities to the first part, to actual transfers, issues, and trading. And if the system is ready to process more transactions, it could process smart contracts. See, there are a lot of things to consider, and we haven't even started to discuss public blockchains versus private blockchains, whether these contracts should live on public or on private things. Well, but these are like next steps, and back to where we are now. Smart accounts are live on testnet, and we'll release them to mainnet next month. So please try to use them, because they will be live soon. And thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Yeah, very extensive. Maybe if you could just give us an illustration of some of the use cases, let's say multi-signature wallet or smart tokens in like a real business setting. That would be just to illustrate the idea.
Yeah, well, multi-signature idea is pretty simple. For example, you had an ICO, and there are 5 founders or 3 founders, and you want to set up so that 4 or 5 people should be able to process a transaction. You don't want to trust to one single guy to keep private key for all the tokens that you collected through ICOs. There are actually two reasons to do this. First, this guy could run away with the private key, and you'll never see him again. And the second thing is that he can lose it, or someone can steal it. You need to enhance security here. So multi-signature is like the golden use case and like the simplest thing that ever comes to mind for, well, obvious reasons.
Gotcha. So no exit scams after that.
Yep, sure. We'll be safe.
Great. Well, let's do a quick Q&A with the audience, and also people who watch us online. You guys can post your questions in the comment section. And yeah, we'll invite Sasha on stage as well. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and the mic will magically appear in front of you. There's a question there. Do we have another mic? Okay.
How are your ICOs doing, which are run on your Waves platform?
They're doing fine, not all of them. Of course, some people ran away with the money, as you realize, because we don't do ICOs on Waves. Some people who use Waves platform do ICOs, as on Ethereum. So, for example, there's a great ICO which was called Primal Base, and you can actually visit their office here in Berlin. It is a co-working space. Somehow we have our event here today because there is not so much space for event there, but it's a co-working space with locations in Berlin, Amsterdam, London, New York, and Moscow. And it works. It's like the first example of tokenization of real estate. And there are other projects, but you can just mention Primal Base because you can really go there, touch it. It's tangible. There's like office space, tables, ceiling, floor, and everything. So people. So it works. It works. But as I said, some people are scammers, and probably we are not the ones to solve this issue.
Okay, cool. Sure. Another question?
Thanks. Yes, this was a ICO use case, but which sectors or which use cases in terms of business life generally for Waves do you see coming up next? Is there any like priority who might be leading the way where we could actually have the, I would say, it would be unfair to say the crypto kitties of normal business life, but actual use cases in business life for using Waves as such?
I can use this. I can use this.
It's okay. This
Cool.
can be passed.
Actually, you don't have too many use cases in open blockchain systems now. Basically, you have two things that work. You have Bitcoin, which is value transfer, and you have ICOs, which are tokenization of venture business. And open blockchains at the moment cannot be used for much else. It's bad, but it's a fact. Yeah, I have to admit this. So either you solve this problem on the level of the open blockchains, or you are trying to create some transitory solution between what we have now and what we are going to have in the brave new world, which emerges in like 20 years. So there is this option, and it's called permissioned closed blockchain. So there is some transitory solution between completely open system and old school closed system. For example, Ripple is an example of those systems, or Hyperledger. And now we are trying to build a platform which can be used by enterprise and public services for all types of applications. And when I mean all types of applications, I say it from experience because I talk to people who want to do all type of things with the blockchain. It's government registries, it's some transaction system, payment system, loyalty programs. Basically, each and every business is looking into blockchain, and they're trying to find some meaning in the blockchain for them. And probably there is some meaning. So basically, you can. So the question like, where can I use internet? Probably everywhere. Yeah, where? What is the best case for internet? It's hard to say. So this is the same here. What is the best case for blockchain? Probably everything, or most things. So we're gonna find out what are the best cases for blockchain technology. Maybe in 5 years we realize what can be done and what cannot be done. But I think that most things can benefit from blockchain, of course.
What's your general approach to cybersecurity of your products, and have you done any external security audits of smart contracts and your web applications?
Yes, we have been audited by Kudelski Security. It's a Swiss company, and they actually green-lighted our code, and now we are being audited by a big Russian company. They're going to do the audit of the whole platform, and the development of a permission chain will be secured from the start, from the scratch, because they will audit the code as it is written. So we write something, and this security company audits the code. So we actually understand that cybersecurity is very important, and it has to be incorporated on the very basic level of blockchain system development.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also have a question about the plans and the preferences for Turing-complete smart contract development. What is your preferences? Alternable smart contracts or inalterable? And why?
I see where this is going. I think that it should be up to user to decide whether this particular contract should be alterable or inalterable, and specify the conditions upon it should be alterable.
Okay, so it's something like options for developers.
I wouldn't like to see it as a hard code option, but rather a logic that would say whether this change is acceptable or not. Maybe some changes should be allowed by one group of people and other changes by other group of people.
Is there any way to create the partial invertible, like some part of functionality cannot be changed, but something?
Yeah, of course. It's like with our current set script transaction, you can filter what changes are actually happening when you alter the contract and, well, accept it or deny it. But still, you have to think all cases up front. That you still have to think of all possible scenarios up front with this. So I wouldn't see smart contracts living a long time. I mean, when you deploy a contract, it will probably live short time just for a deal between several parties. But it won't be an application that you write for, that will be run by your company for 7 years after you deployed it with one single click.
Yeah, understand. Thank you.
Any further questions?
You mentioned that throughout the presentation that certain decisions might be taken, let's say, by a part of the network, including certain transactions. Is that in direct reference to a potential implementation of something similar to sharding, for example?
Yes, eventually we'll have to do that because you should realize if sharding was there, we would be good. So basically, Ethereum is a good system with sharding. So if we solve sharding, we don't have to do anything else. It's cool. Everything works. So the question is how to do that.
Now, talking smart contracts, you're inevitably, or you should be inevitably, for better or for worse, on the radar for regulators. You mentioned regulation already, that this is going to be a process that will take a decade or more. Are you already collecting the questions that come up, and are they being heard by the regulators, be it on a national or European level? What's your experience?
We have been talking to many regulators, not only in Russia, in some other countries as well, and it's complicated, but they do listen to what you say, because the question is, the problem here is they don't understand what it is, so they have to ask. So there is still some room for helping them accept, make the right decisions and adopt the right laws. So it's moving into that direction. For example, Malta, I talked about Malta today, and it's a great example of regulation going probably into the right direction, because they can see the value from the blockchain ecosystem for Malta, and they are trying to have the laws which are not restrictive. In other cases, you have like some worse examples. In Russia, for example, it's quite restrictive. In the European Union, they don't care too much, in my opinion, about the whole space. So in Asia, it's different in different countries. So we'll see where it's going. I think that blockchain won't become, the only thing which will need a new regulation. Probably we need a new regulation for the whole range of things, including data protection, including many different things. And blockchain is going to be only a small part of the whole picture.
I was thinking that it might make sense to sort of collect a couple of typical questions or constellations that you could set up and ask, what are your responses as a regulator? So if I got you right, it may be making use to see Malta as a best practice case in terms of regulation?
Probably yes. I would probably somehow highlight Japan's example, because they have at least separate group of people who are doing some kind of licensing of exchanges. So, and you know what you want to do if you want to do an ICO in Japan. You need to go to Japanese financial authority and ask for permission. So it's quite good. And Malta is also a good example from what I heard now, from what I've heard before. It's interesting because you need to see some value for your country, and Malta understand that it's like some kind of offshore location, and for offshore locations it might be a new stage in development of their offshore services, so to say. And it's not so interesting. For example, in Switzerland, they were very active, but it's fizzling out now. They are not so active, and they are becoming quite restrictive. So in Crypto Valley, they are not so fast moving at the moment. For smaller countries, it might be more interesting.
As a matter of fact, one of our ambassadors here, Jonathan, used to be, actually currently is the advisor to Maltese government, and he helped to shape the regulation that was passed earlier this month in Malta. So in the networking session, feel free to approach him. He has a lot of good insights. There's another question right there.
All right, great talk. I just wanted to ask, so how do you choose your validator nodes? Like how are these nodes chosen? Or like because basically this node validates all the smart contracts, everything that other people, right?
Well, it's a proof of stake system. So there's an algorithm which is called proof of stake, and it's like in Bitcoin where you have proof of work, but here you have your balance of coins instead of hash power. So the probability of block generation is proportional to how many coins you have. So
yeah, I mean, but I know the proof of stake how it works, but how do you get to choose who gets to be a validator?
The next miner. So like there is an algorithm that determines the next miner, and this miner actually validates the transactions and puts them into the new block. So,
I think the question is a little bit different, though.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay,
So your question is, how do we choose validators? Yeah. So now everyone validates everything. That's right. And we are not changing it like soon. There are systems that can limit, that can allow you to limit the number of nodes that validate things like secure multi-party computations, or maybe delegated proof of stake. We have these ideas later in roadmap, I would say.
Last year you have partnered with Deloitte. So what's the future of that partnership?
We are still partners, so we have so many partners now. So actually, we are focusing on big government partnerships now, and I hope that, and I am sure that the next wave of blockchain ecosystem evolution is in government and enterprise sector. So we are really focusing on this sector now. So like startup phase is a little bit over, I think, and you need to go to enterprise, you need to go to governments to make the blockchain really usable, because as I said a couple minutes ago, you still have two working use cases. It's value transfer and ICOs. So we need a next use case. Otherwise, the whole ecosystem is just going to fizzle out, and people will start asking questions. Guys, what have you done besides ICOs?
I have two more. Yeah. I have two more use cases. Would you like to hear them?
Sure.
Yeah, things like immutable log of events, so that you use blockchain, so you store logs, you store information of something happening, and you have this single unified version of events for every party there. And in case something bad happens, you can use this log. Like, it would be great to go to court with this log of events that is inalterable and no one controls it. So this is like use case number 3. And
but it's value transfer, actually. It's the same as value transfer. It's value transfer. It's the same.
Why?
Because you verify your value transfer through this log, so it's more or less the same thing.
All right, so it's value transfer like immutable log then. All right. And another thing where blockchain can actually work great with smart contracts, for example, you're a producer and you produce something like sushi chopsticks. And you can, and you wish to produce like 10,000 for a price of, I don't know, 10 cents, but you don't have customer to buy this amount. But there are customers that are willing to buy less. It would be great to build a smart contract that exposes your intention to do this, and other people can jump into a smart contract and commit into buying in case the cap of 10,000 is reached. This leverages openness and uncensorship of a blockchain. And when you will be able to take this to court in case someone fails to deliver or to buy, this will be a great advancement for adoption of blockchain.
The problem is you cannot take blockchain to court.
Tell me?
You cannot take blockchain to court just now.
Yes, you can now.
In the US, they had some cases where blockchain data was accepted as a legal proof, but I think that's all. So probably if you have something on the blockchain, it cannot serve as a proof in the court of law at the moment.
Yeah, but when emails and just logs on database servers appeared first, they weren't accepted to court either. But then the technology evolved and they got accepted, and now this thing works, so I think we're just not there just yet.
For example, the Netherlands is already on the way.
Yeah.
Well, this is something I would see as a very, very interesting perspective, because currently at court you're just like delivering a sort of proof that is more or less credible, and if we could get that into regulation from positive side of things, it would be a tremendous help in many fields. If that becomes a reality, that we have a document and we can prove it. I know there are a couple of projects out there, Factum for instance is working on that as well. But if we can make that, if we can together push that into legislation, it would be an immense breakthrough. Thanks.
The next step in that regard would be the acceptance of recording contracts, where you have code.
Jonathan, would you repeat, please, so that our online viewers can also hear?
Yeah. So I think the next step in that regard would be the acceptance, at least in terms of regulation, of recording contracts, where you have code which is supplemented by text and which is accepted as, let's say, as a normal form of contract. Because right now, smart contracts in themselves, they do not always signify some form of agreement. So ultimately, I would say the next step would be a hybrid of the two, and then we'll see where that takes us.
Which brings us back to replacing social consensus with technical consensus, actually.
Step by step, I guess.
Okay, we'll take one last question, if there is one. I guess it's been quite extensive, and I invite you to thank you. First of all, thank you to our speakers. Give a round of applause. And I would like to invite you to the networking part, where we're going to have a few drinks, some food, and just, some live interaction.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.